It's Wednesday. Now Wednesday is my favorite day of the week because I get to shred with some incredible women. So
Is this
welcome
how we should?
everyone. Yeah, we'll do shimmy. Amy, and it's Amy Moses, and she's not going to part the sea. It's so dumb. I'm sure you get that all the time. All right.
Once in a while.
Once in a while, yeah. Hello, Amy, and welcome to Women That Shred.
Hello. Thank you, Raquel. So happy to be here, and happy Dog Biscuit Appreciation Day.
Oh, who can keep up with all these national holidays?
Luckily, I have a dog-specific calendar that shows me only dog-related holidays, so that's how I know.
Okay, and speaking of dogs, for any of you watching, that is a cutout of a dog. Don't be freaked out why it's not moving, because that happened to me on a meeting. I was like, why isn't your dog moving?
That is a cardboard cutout of my dog, Gracie. Remember during COVID when you could put yourself in a seat of an arena for a basketball game, football game? So I did that with Gracie for the Milwaukee Brewers. I am a Chicago Cubs fan, but I chose the Brewers because it was only $50 in comparison to, let's say, the Dodgers, who is $200.
Okay, yeah.
And all of the proceeds went to the Wisconsin Humane Society. And so they had a special pet section, and you got to look for your pet. They posted photos on their website. Poor Gracie was seated between a cat and a rabbit. And I was like, how's she supposed to watch the baseball games when she's sitting between a cat and a rabbit?
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. But it's such a great idea. I feel like so many different companies and just even organizations like that did some like really cool things. I remember, I think it was the Denver Broncos, because South Park, the creators are from Denver and everything's created. They had, I don't know if you remember, there was I think it was the first game that they televised. They had all the South Park characters like cutouts.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Yeah. So that's awesome. So now you have Gracie all the time.
I do. That's Gracie number 2. I keep pointing the wrong way. Gracie number 2. The real Gracie's laying on the floor beside me. But yeah, the funny thing about that was with branding is I had a Chicago Cubs scarf on her, and I thought, there's no way they're going to let this be admitted. Yeah. And they said they would send an email if it was a rejection. And so I waited, didn't get a rejection email. And then when I actually got the real thing, which was a whole story in and of itself, which we won't tell, it's kind of like pixelated. So they did wipe out the Cubs bandana, and it's just this pixelated look on her bandana.
That's funny that they did it, that they actually.
Yeah. They're like, we're not having a Cubs fan in our seats.
I love that. Now, Amy and I have actually met. There's a few people that I've had on the show that I've never met before. Amy's one of them that I did back in 2018 for the MERS conference. And the reason I bring it up is because not only did she and I get to meet, but it was like kind of the start of something new for me. And it's kind of crazy that 4 years later, we're here and I'm hosting a live show, because that was the first time I actually did a public speaking gig in front of there was a pretty good amount of people at the event.
Yeah, probably 100 people there.
Yeah, and I was freaking out. And of course, Lisa Haynes, who's the Chief and Inclusion Officer for MBA, she spoke ahead of me, and she was just so eloquent, such a great speaker. And I'm thinking, crap, I have to follow that. But I've never done this, in such a big arena for me. I mean, I've done cycling and yoga, but it's funny to think about that. That was 4 years ago, and how much I've grown. And I'm sure you have grown so much just in the last 4 years as well. And so that's kind of where I want to circle to our topic, about using our voice. And I'm curious, what does that mean to you to use your voice and be intentional about it?
Yeah. And, I think the first example, Raquel, goes back to when we met, right? Because that was my first year managing the MERS user conference. And we had tagged on an e-mortgage boot camp for the very first time. It was my first year living out here. This week, I've been in Virginia 4 years. And I can't remember all the details. I've been trying to think about it this week, but I'd somehow had met Tony Thompson, founder of NAMBA. and thought, you know what, this would be great to somehow involve NAMBA in our conference. And it would be great if we did some type of a women's event. And neither of those had been done before. And so I was trying to determine, how do we incorporate NAMBA and a women's event into the user conference? And now, right, it's been 5 years since Marsha Davies started Empower, and we have the next conference that Molly and Jerry do. So there's a lot of women's conferences and events geared towards women in the mortgage industry now. But back then, 4 years ago, there wasn't as many, right? And so that was one place that I had to use my voice and think about, we need to do these things. You know, and DE&I wasn't as engaged in the everyday conversation as it is now either, right? And so I used my voice to set those up, and then asked Tony if he would like to come and speak, or if he had somebody he would like to send from his organization. And that's where he sent you, having no idea, right, where it would lead, and that it was your first time ever public speaking.
I know. When Tony called me, I was like, you want me to what?
And I think about how much I learned from you that night, because I remember afterwards, after it was all over, you said, I'm going to go sit at the bar. You had your phone. I'm going to go sit at the bar and write a post about this for LinkedIn. And I thought, she's going to go sit at the bar and write a post about that for LinkedIn? I mean, that seems so intentional. And I thought, so I'm going to have a glass of wine while I do it. I want to make sure I do it before I go home. And that stuck with me, Raquel.
Really?
Because now I do that all these years later, right? Be very intentional about using my voice on LinkedIn for a variety of reasons. But back then, that was a brand new concept to me. So I learned something from you that night.
That's so funny. And Jerry just popped in. So she heard us next. That's right. We have a conference.
Dallas.
Yeah, no, they have their conference coming up too. But yeah, it's funny because I would get made fun of all the time, because the event would end and I'd be in the corner and they're like, why aren't you mingling? I'm like, no. Like, there's a reason why I'm at this conference. There's a reason why I know Tony obviously wanted to give me the opportunity to speak, but he also understood, like, Raquel, she's going to make sure that she promotes this. She's going to make sure that she takes the pictures and she does all that. And there's a reason for it. It's because I'm very intentional about it. And I know what comes of it. So that's why after an event, I always step aside, do the post, because I want to do real time. I don't want to get caught up and then, just hanging out. And then it's the next day. And I feel like then it's kind of like, all right, it's not real time anymore. So yeah, I'm super OCD when it comes to that, but I feel like it's made a huge difference. So I'm glad that you actually took that away from me.
And I can't tell you all the plane rides home from events that I have had where I'm posting, because what I started doing is I wait until the entire event is done and then I do a recap of it, right? Which has become this crazy thing, Moses's Musings, which took off in a way that I never anticipated. And I try to capture the essence of the conference, because what I realized is that so many people were asking me, like, what was that event like? How many people were there? What were people talking about? Who was there? And so I thought, why not put a recap online of what happened at that conference, what some of the sessions were about, right? And celebrate people who are there. Like, these people got an award. These people, recently received a promotion that I found out about, or changed companies, right? Or were recognized on stage, what have you. And so that's where using my voice to celebrate other people has come into play as well. And I was intentional about it, but I just didn't realize how much it would mean to others and how people look forward to learning about their peers in that way.
It's so true. I found that as well. And Suha, who's popped in too, she's really good about recapping. I know that she'll edit some videos and then she'll do kind of a little slideshow with the event as well. I actually look forward to those posts where everybody does a recap and the pictures of everybody else and all the industry people. And I think it's really cool. But yeah, there's an intent behind it. Not just like, hey, I just want to show how much fun I had. It's like, no, I really want to showcase, this particular event and the people that were at it and what they had to say. And people
And what I found is it makes me be more aware while I'm at the conference, right? To paying more attention in the sessions, like what are things that I really want to highlight that people are saying? What are key statistics that are being shared? And so it engages me in a different way in the event too.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And it's funny how, even Jess, jumped in and said that you're the supreme networker. And, I have to say though, with putting ourselves out there too, I feel that what happens is people feel like they get to know us online or social media. That's like, for me, it's big. Just put yourself out there so that when you are at a conference, you already feel like you know someone. So when you go up to them, there's already kind of like this different level. You've already taken away a certain layer of that introduction. And so then it ultimately makes everybody like a great networker as well. Like, I feel like so many people are like, oh, I'm not really good at networking and I don't know what to say. And I'm like, yeah, but just, see the value in being someone that they already recognize and they feel they could connect with. So it just makes it easier for them to come up to you and have that conversation go a little bit deeper than if, what do you do? Where are you from? When they already know that,
right?
It's like, oh my gosh, I saw the other day that you were, in San Diego for the NBA conference, and tell me about it. And it really makes a huge difference. So that's why I encourage a lot of people to put themselves out there. It's not necessarily like an ego driven thing or a vanity thing. It's more about like, hey, with COVID and the pandemic, networking's different. It's changed. So what would like advice would you give as far as networking, since you're so good at it?
Well, one thing I want to say is I heard you talk about in a different post or a different one of these shred shows, Raquel, was that putting yourself out there requires you to be vulnerable, right? And I have to admit, I was scared to do that for a long, long time, right? Because I thought, I like to keep myself kind of hidden, right? And I didn't want to share too much about myself. But once I did it, like that was, people would come up to and say things like, oh my gosh, you were at the Field of Dreams game. I love seeing that photo of you playing catch with your dad. And like things like that really made a deep impact with people, and they felt a stronger connection with me. So it validated me sharing, right? And then I became comfortable with sharing a little bit more and a little bit more. And as far as to answer your question, a tip for networking, what I realize is I always assume that other people know each other. And what I've realized is they don't. And so I was kind of scared to be like, oh, Raquel, do you know Jerry? And then I realized, no, like, don't do that. Because even if they know each other, they'll be so appreciative that you took the initiative to try to introduce them. Right. And also don't be scared to go up and introduce yourself to somebody, especially if it's going to benefit your colleague. So funny example I just thought of, when I was at the MBA conference, the annual in October, I had went for the all day session, the Empower session. And I had heard Christy Furco tell the story that really hit home to me, right? Really hit home to me about sacrificing all the sacrifices she made in her career. And I won't get into the story, but it just really hit home. And so I saw her at the Wells reception the next day or 2 days later. And I just went right up to her and, introduced myself and said, thank you for telling your story. It really, really made a difference to me. And one of my colleagues was like, do you know her? And I said, no. He's like, but you just went up to her. And I was like, yes, because I wanted her to know that she made a difference to me. And I'm sure she's not the only person that she made a difference to by being vulnerable and telling that story. Right. So just kind of leading by example too, like you can do that as well. And it goes back to your point of when you follow people on LinkedIn, for example, and get to know a little bit about them, then you have something to go up and talk to them about.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you mentioned Christy, because that's exactly what I did last week when Marsha invited me to the Empower Luncheon. And, she was obviously, at the front table, and I had seen her in the meet and greet, and she had to run out. So I didn't get a chance to introduce myself in that very small setting. So I was like, all right, maybe I'll get the opportunity later. So then we go to the luncheon, and obviously, the featured speaker was Rita Moreno. So everybody was going up to Rita. And I was like the only I think she thought that I was going to try to interrupt her with Rita. They weren't talking, but Rita was there, and I think she was maybe taking pictures for people with Rita. But I went up to Christy and I was like, Christy, I actually want to introduce myself to you. And I think she was a little surprised, right? Because everyone's like, Rita, Rita, Rita. So I just told her, I said, I'm in the industry, and I told her that I know Josh Pitts. I'm like, I host a show for Josh, and she knows Josh very well.
Okay.
So of course she's like, I love Josh. I wasn't stupid. I knew what I was doing. So I mentioned Josh, and she's like, oh my gosh, he's great. And I said, yeah, I host this show, Women That Shred, and I would love for you to be a guest on it one day. And she's like, absolutely. And I'm like, can we take a picture? So we took a picture with her and Lisa, because Lisa hangs with Claire. So I got Lisa in the picture, and it was fantastic. And that's the thing, is you have to kind of, set aside maybe the intimidation factor, and that, like, oh, she's, the new executive director of the NBA. Like, why would she want to talk to me? And it's like, no, you realize that at one point, she was probably looking up to someone else and did the same thing. And so when you understand that, like, I have people coming to me and I laugh, they're like, oh, I see you all over LinkedIn and I can't believe I'm meeting you. And so everybody has that at a different level. And so it's just kind of funny that it doesn't matter where we're at. We're still always going to have someone that we're like, ooh,
right.
And so, and just go for it. What's the worst that can happen? That she would have been like, just like turned her head and not responded to it.
Not even acknowledged us.
Yeah, that would have been bad. But Molly Dowdy just popped in too with next. Oh my gosh. Here, let's go up the comments. So you want to know one of the ingenious. Oh, it's a see, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I love that it's shoes, because I kind of do the same thing with like colors.
Yeah. And that kind of started accidentally too as well, right? Like I found these really cool Rubik's shoes heels one time. And so the heel looks like a Rubik's Cube. And I've had so many people ask me, do they turn? And I'm always like, I don't think I would want to walk on them if they turn.
They're like, hey, let me take it off and see if you can put it together.
Right. And so I wore those. It might even been 2018, Raquel. It was at MERS user conference in boot camp. And it just spread like wildfire. All these people were taking pictures of the shoes and putting them on the app, right? And men were asking, can I take a picture of your shoes? My wife will want to see these. I'm like, yes, of course, right? And so then the next year, as we're preparing for the Yukon, we put the app live a couple of weeks ahead of time. And somebody messages me in the app, Amy, what are your shoes going to be like this year? Can't wait to see your cool shoes. So I got a couple comments. I'm like, right, no pressure, no pressure. And my sister was here staying with me, and I was like, Julie, help. I was just working crazy hours preparing for the conference. And I was like, I need you to find me really cool shoes online. And she loves doing research like that. So she went out, she found all these incredible pairs of shoes. And she found this killer website where they had basketball shoes, football shoes, baseball shoes. And I was like, oh, holy grail, right? So I ordered football wedges, baseball heels, basketball heels, and I wear them to this conference along with some others. And I don't, I'm running around doing a million things, hosting the conference and moderating panels and all that. And I don't think about it until people stop me and they're like, oh, I'm like, what? Your shoes? And somebody who was on a panel with me, after the panel is over, I'm walking off stage and he stops and he's like, I just want everyone to notice Amy's incredible baseball heels. And I was so embarrassed. He's like, last night she had basketball ones on and today it's baseball. I was like, this man noticed my shoes. And so then it just became a thing, right? And so now it's like, okay, what's the next new cool, unique shoe heel that I can wear to a show? And it's fun. It engages people. It's fairly easy to do. And it's, a talking point.
Yeah. Okay. So Jennifer, she has a lot to say. Positive feedback for speakers is so helpful. Amy, I try to do that as well. Speakers, most of the time, no matter how experienced they are, have a little bit of nervousness. Once they finish that speech, the relief kicks in. Once it's over, when people praise one another, creates more vulnerability and opportunity for future experiences. As women especially, let's keep empowering others, especially women. So true, because I will tell you this, Jennifer, Marsha Davies was so nervous to interview Rita Moreno. So we were in the meet and greet and we're sitting there talking and she's like, I'm nervous. I'm like, Marsha, you do this all the time. I mean, she's had incredible women at the Empower luncheons, but for whatever reason, she's like, Rita, she's like, I did so much homework. I read so much about her. So it was like refreshing to know too, that she was a little nervous, and she did fantastic. And I went up to her after and I said, you did great. That was awesome. She's like, okay. And so, yeah, I love, it's really important to still empower those women that you might think don't need it and don't need that positive feedback. We're women, we're human. We always need that positive feedback.
Right. Men too, not just women. Men need that. Like everybody needs. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody needs to know what they're doing is appreciated. Right. And especially, going back to intention for a second, Raquel, I found this quote that I absolutely love. And it's intentional living is the art of making our own choices before others' choices make us.
Ooh.
Right. Making our own choices before others' choices make us. And I think that applies to so many things in our life. And when we think about speaking, right, like, or giving people feedback, right, like we're making that choice to go up and do that. That's being intentional. I can't think of an example right now of other people's choices making us in that example, but I've just really been resonating on that and thinking that over, because that is, I think, the prime example of intentional living.
Yes. And Dal's going to clip that. That was a perfect one. Well, I love that. No, I love that, because I never really thought about it that way. Right. Where they say that go ahead and, you decide your narrative, or else someone else is going to make that narrative for you. Right. Same thing, like with branding and putting yourself out there, like you be the one that decides how people should see you, or you want to put yourself out there. Don't let others decide on that. So it's the same thing, even with like labeling, right? Like that's why this show is fantastic, because we're not really talking about your actual position in this industry or who you're working for, because that's not all we're about, right? Like there's so many different layers to us, and I don't want us to be labeled, because there's no reason to, like, I think people still label people for whatever reason it is. And I'm that person's like, no labels. Right.
So I know, I hear you say that at the beginning of every show, no labels. And I think that makes it easier to go up and approach somebody, right? Like, I can approach them because I'm not thinking of them as CEO or COO. I'm just thinking of them as Lisa, Christy, Raquel, right?
Yeah. And I didn't even think about that either. That, if you're not so quick to label the person that you're going up to, then it does ease it a little bit. Because that's, I've reached out to plenty of people on LinkedIn that have certain labels or titles where you would think like, there's no way this person's going to acknowledge my presence. And it's the opposite. So that was a big learning lesson for me as well. And Brad, yes, appreciates recognizing people's intentional actions, who they are and how they show up. Yes, Brad is one of my awesome connections, and he's a life coach, and he's great. So I appreciate you hopping on, Brad, because that's what happens. A lot of women tend to watch the show. It's nice to have some men hop in.
I think there are some more men out there. Hopefully, we'll see who showed up.
I think Paul jumped in the beginning as well. I don't know Paul.
Oh, Paul did?
Yes.
You don't know Paul? Well, I'll have to connect you and Paul.
No.
I would love to do that.
Okay, please do. Like, absolutely. And that's the thing too, is that I try to tell people all the time, if you see someone that's in my network or I'm connected with that you want it like a soft intro to, let me know. Like even today I had my mentor reach out to me. Hey, are there any podcasts that you think I'd be able to come on? I'm like, absolutely. And I already did some introductions. So that's key too, for all of us here to be able to help each other, expand our networks, because, we can all benefit from getting to know each other. Like I don't think it's as competitive as it used to be. I feel like, and I did a post about this yesterday where I had lunch with two other loan officers from 2 different companies. And one of them I used to work for, and I took a picture together, and I was like, oh my gosh, everyone's going to start getting nervous because here we're having lunch together and hanging out. But at the end of the day, I was like, it's all about the people first and the relationships. It shouldn't matter that we're, maybe in competitive mortgage, companies.
I agree. And I feel that has been a big shift in the industry, Raquel. So I used to be the editor of a brewing newspaper. And I noticed the collaboration in the brewing industry, right? When I lived in Colorado, all these breweries were collaborating. And I thought, this is so unique. I've never seen anything quite like this in another industry. And over the past 5 years, I felt that shift in the mortgage industry where there's a lot more collaboration. And at one of my eMortgage boot camps, I came up with the slogan, collaborate to innovate. Because as we're trying collaborate to innovate, I put it on a lot of my posts. So as we're trying to move the industry digital, especially, right, there's this group of us, even though some of the companies might be competitors, everybody's still collaborating to try to move to innovation to digital, right? We all have the same end game, which is to completely transform the way borrowers get their loans, right? And make it all electronic. So there's so much collaboration going on. And it's exciting to see that move into our industry.
It is. Like I have built some great friendships, like even, so Molly, I don't know if she's still on, and Suha, but we had like a little happy hour group, right, during COVID. And I especially was so appreciative of it because I had gotten out of the industry. I was on my own. And the fact that these ladies are like, oh no, you're always in it, right? Like you're still a part of this. And that just made me feel so good to know that just because I'm not in the industry anymore doesn't mean that like I am to be ignored, right? Like we can't talk to her now.
Right. She's out of the clique.
Anymore. And so we continue to do that. And funny enough, I ended up back in the industry just 5 months ago. So it also made the transition so much better because I had maintained all those relationships with everyone. So I was able to ease right back in. And there's something to be said about that. There really is. Like, that's what I love about where this industry is going. And there's so many of us that are using our voice to help it move forward. I
agree. Great. And there's two points I want to make about that, Raquel. One is having that external network is so important. And it took me a long time to realize that in my career too, right? That I could reach outside of people within my own organization and start building those external relationships, because I feel like nobody really tells you that in your career. Like you're focused on your boss and your boss's boss and your team and right, everything that's going on, especially if you work for a larger organization and maybe aren't externally focused. But you need to build those relationships outside of your company. And I learned something from Daniel Pink in his Pinkcast. He just wrote a new book all about regrets that I'm dying to read. But I listened to a couple of podcasts he did. And he said connection is lack of connection is one of the biggest regrets that people have in their life based on all of his research and studies.
Wow.
And so if you're thinking about reaching out to somebody, you're wondering if you should, you already have your answer. Do it. Reach out. And then you won't have that regret that you didn't do it. And so I would, that goes for your personal life and your professional life, right? If you're thinking about reaching out to somebody, introducing yourself to somebody, making that connection on LinkedIn, setting up a meeting for 2 other people, cheering somebody on, do it, because you won't regret having not done it.
Yeah. So Paul, because I see he just jumped back in. Thank you. I'm going to reach out to you. Okay. We're going to connect. This is going to be very intentional now. For sure. But
Raquel's intentionally using her voice.
Yes.
As per usual.
I know, shocker. But it's funny because you mentioned like connection, right? Because our episode next week is going to be about building true connection with Sarah. And I don't know, her last name is Crossley. She's with Form Free, but she's going to be on. And that's what we're going to talk about.
Yep, I think
it's true connection.
Might be listening right now. Yes.
I know, maybe. Hi, Sarah, if you're listening. So that's what I love. Like everything kind of lends into the next episode, and all these conversations, they all essentially, lead into the next in a way where I feel like this is almost like we're going through this like journey through the mortgage industry right now, and as like through the perspective of a woman. Like I don't know what it is. Like I'm loving this. Like as I'm sitting here talking to you, and in the engagement, you have those moments, right, where you're like, this is really cool, and I'm having one of those moments right now with you, Amy. So thank you.
Nothing could make me happier, Raquel.
No, I still feel so grateful that I have a voice, you have a voice, we get to share it. We get to use it for good. We get to, help others, empower. Like it's truly amazing. And so I just want to thank you for being a guest.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and everyone who's always so gracious with their time and pops in and it engages in the comments. Oh gosh, and one last time, we'll have this nice comment here from Jennifer before we close out. Honest people and businesses network and collaborate to lift each other up and provide additional resources for clients. Not one brand is the best for anyone. In behavioral health, we network with everyone to ensure quality of care for our patients. Not one program or brand is going to work for everyone. Being able to suggest another brand or organization for someone is appreciated more than we all know and can create long-lasting relationships and respect. Bravo. Yes.
Right.
So true. So true. So if you have people in your network that you can definitely introduce to other people, like you're showing your value too, right? As a person.
Right.
Like,
and you're gaining that trust of others, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not saying what I have to offer you is necessarily the best. And that's how you're going to build relationships, is by securing that trust. And I just wanted to thank everybody who joined the call. I want to be intentional about thanking them, because I was inviting people who have made a big difference in my life, who have used their voice to somehow intentionally help me, whether it was, reaching out when I started a new job, or, whether it was inviting me into a friend circle when I moved, or there's just a plethora of reasons that I, handpicked some of these people and invited them. So thank you, everybody, for the difference that you've made in my life over the past 4 years since I've been here, especially, but overall as well.
No, and obviously you've made a huge impact in their lives for them to show up, and you can tell everyone has so much respect for you. I know I do, and they look up to you, and so I love that. So we will go ahead and end the live broadcast. Thanks again to everyone, and we'll see you next Wednesday, and have a great rest of your week.
Bye. Thanks, everybody. Bye, Raquel.